канал.
Зараз говорив український канал, це перекладач, як мене чути зараз в українському каналі. Чи є якісь побажання, як чути перекладача зараз в українському каналі? Трошки невеличкі. Протестуємо трошки український канал, аби могли всі перевірити, як чують перекладача в українському каналі. Отак.
Колеги, я рада вас всіх вітати. Це другий рік поспіль ми проводимо бізнес-форум з питань детінізації цивілізації і говоримо про проблеми, які пов'язані з певною паралельною реальністю, в якій ми з вами наразі перебуваємо. Є білий бізнес, який сплачує всі податки. І, чесно кажучи, інколи деякі ініціативи державних органів влади щодо навіть підвищення певного тиску сприймаються так з сумнівом і осторогою. А є бізнес, який, на жаль, не сплачує податків і знаходиться в тіні, через що наш державний бюджет недоотримує надходжень. Легальний бізнес потерпає від нерівної конкуренції. Ну, звісно, недопостача у нас і в соціальний сектор через недоходження до бюджету. Але, на жаль, ініціатив щодо боротьби з тінню за останній час, чесно кажучи, ми не дуже бачимо. І таких реформ, які б були направлені саме на вирішення цієї проблеми. Адже в тіні перебуває досить суттєва частина економіки України, і за деякими показниками різних спеціалістів, за офіційними даними, це навіть понад 30%. Отже, сьогодні ми будемо говорити про певну нерівність, про деякі ініціативи, адже наразі ми спостерігаємо ряд законодавчих ініціатив, які відстрочують введення в дію певних фіскальних заходів, на яких свого часу акцентувала увагу і Європейська бізнес-асоціація, і взагалі вся прозора бізнес-спільнота. Отже, я дуже рада сьогодні вітати вас з нами і хочу представити вам спікерів нашої першої панелі, саме з якими ми проговоримо в контексті реформ і потенційних загроз для легального бізнесу і певних перекосів на ринку щодо білого та не зовсім білого бізнесу. Саме, до речі, хотіла згадати, що на замовлення Європейської бізнес-асоціації компанія JFK нещодавно провела дослідження, яке вказало, що 73% респондентів з галузі побутової електротехніки та електроніки вважають засоби РРО, реєстраторів розрахункових операцій, тобто те, що ми говоримо про фіскалізацію, одним із найефективніших інструментів боротьби з нелегальним імпортом. І сьогодні ми також поговоримо про ряд досліджень і в другій панелі трохи глибше заглибимось в окремі індустрії. Отже, я рада представити вам наших перших панелістів. Це Володимир Котенко, EY, і голова податкового комітету Європейської бізнес-асоціації, Олександр Лазарев, Ламарін і співголова
Lazarev is the co-head of the tax committee of the EBA, and Valeria Bespala. We also have Yevgen Shkola from Samsung, member of the Committee on Domestic Products, and Yuri Haida is the senior economist from the Center of the Economic Strategies. So, at first, I'd like to pass the floor to Volodymyr. And he will talk a bit about the legislative initiatives, and we've been working with them for so long. And some innovations with regards to the tax administration, any risks of increasing the fiscal and taxation burden and pressure on the business. Can I talk not only about the legal initiatives, as our first panel should be more of an emotional, I would say. But yeah, I kind of try to restrain myself. Yeah, we need to develop an emotional environment because the first panel should be emotional because we're talking about the de-shadowing practices. And in most cases, we have people here who are not hiding in the shadow. They are completely transparent, and therefore they might have a sort of unilateral approach in terms of saying that shadow business is wrong and there could be no other options. Our purpose is to identify for ourselves if there are any changes or our emotions, or are they tricking us, or they're saying that something is wrong about the de-shadowing. And then there is another objective after this panel where we'll be developing some specific actions or claims that should be brought to the agenda of the public authorities. And I believe that we should start with identify the main reason for our meeting. What are we trying to achieve? I mean, are we saying that they're so courageous not paying the taxes and we are not like that? We should be similar to them, or there are some inner limitations that we want to keep and not pay and make sure that we are paying taxes in a responsible manner. And I believe that's the second issue, really. And on our way to fulfilling those obligations and commitments, what we start thinking about? I keep hearing from many representatives of different branches of power that just taxes are complex taxes. There could be no simple taxes, and I come to agree to that. should we take into consideration all these circumstances? That means that we go too much into details, and that's all about bringing a lot of complexities. But that is starting not to work, let's say. Uh, whenever there is, together with the simplified taxation, there is a freedom of movement, so to say, when people start to looking for gaps. So for the transparent businesses, those comprehensive taxation, they appear not to be very flexible, because together with the complex system, there is a shadow system which is absolutely free from any complexities. Well, it has our own, well, its own complexities, but they're different, and it brings some advantages if compared to those who are paying those complex taxes. And unfortunately, we come to a point that we start thinking that these authorities, they forgot about the shadow economy, and they start focusing on this white business. We understand that the laws are being written for those who comply with them, that is, for the white businesses by default. But in the same time, if we understand, and we all learn the reports of the economy, they're clearly indicating the level of shadow economy. But still, if all the actions of the authorities are designed to have more taxes for the white business, then we come to a question: why is the shadow economy forgotten? And then we get 5600 that limits the transfer of money. We have a constant increase of the unified social contribution. We have significant promises that, well, we'll have a radical reform of the taxation. You just need to wait for that. Just wait a bit, and we'll have this reform implemented. So we, the wide businesses, we have just simply to observe how the wide businesses are overcoming those difficulties in registering the tax declaration. And in some cases, we have to look when the other businesses are paying less. So that sort of situation results in another event that, of course, we maintain our compliance with the legislation, but we keep accumulating those emotions that we try to share at these forums like that. But still, we need to, to spread this wave of emotions. But after that, we want to have some leftovers of those emotions, and those leftovers should be shared with the public agencies. And we'll keep on going. We'll keep mentioning those challenges to the public agencies. We'll keep making sure they are on the agenda of the public agencies, so that they will be transferring into a number of draft laws and regulations, resulting in the resolution of the challenges. As we can see some of the efforts undertaken by the public agencies, but they're only creating bureaucracy. They're not solving the challenge. They're creating a fuss, only a fuss, which is designed only to support the authors of those regulations. That is, making sure they will keep their positions safe. And I'd like to quote a political celebrity. Mm, Like, what sort of authorities can you still have in order to fight this shadow economy? What do you still need? But hopefully, after this emotional panel, there will be another panel, more specific, where we'll try to identify what sort of authorities should you need to have, or what sort of challenges should you need to come up with in order to de-shadow the economy. So that it would be really risky to pursue with the shadow economy, so that we won't have 35%. That's official, by the way. and we'll have the reduction of that level to at least 10 or maybe 17% as it is in other countries. Now, that would serve as an indicator of countering the shadow economy in Ukraine. And thank you very much for your remarks. I remembered uh, when you were recalling this quote, I sort of remembered another event, and we were asking public officials about the implementation of certain reforms, why the EBA proposals are not being implemented, and the answer was that there is not enough political will, unfortunately. Well, we could try to help them and develop this political will. I'd like to pass the floor to Alexander. We've been talking for many years about the need to reform the customs agency of Ukraine, but unfortunately this is not happening. So, what is the current status around the customs service, about the customs registration, and any functions which are something that the state wants the customs to fulfill? Thank you. Talking about the customs, we all can hear that the major problem of our country is all about smuggling. And everyone thinks that that's the issue for the customs to deal. But unfortunately, countering the smuggling, as we can hear right now, this is not a functional responsibility of the customs office. And it's very easy. Why? Talking about the development of international cooperation on free trade, for example, the trade with the EU, we don't have any import, well, fees. There's just a VAT, and that's all. So the customs only registering that so that any shadow entities, well, they perfectly know how to work and how to make sure they're not paying the VATs or any other fees to the customs. So the customs is simply fulfilling the current legislation, and that's all. It seems like the customs was considered as the only one responsible for the failures in the state. And speaking on the smuggling, and since we're talking about this emotionally, I keep saying that you need to fight with the smuggling from the very market and not from the very morning. So it should be that we are making sure that those products could not be sold inside the country. Or you would need to submit the documents, identify the origin of this product. And without the fiscalization of all the product chains, without the ability to identify the origin of this product from the border to the market, without all of that, we won't be able to overcome the smuggling. We could search for any means or ways, but without doing that, that's something still impossible. I'm not talking about the smuggling of weapons or drugs. This is definitely something that you need to work with, and you need to install some equipment for that. That's natural. But speaking of the other smuggling that is being used by the analytical groups, those groups of people that are organizing that with the use of financial tools, and they're only part of the illegal sales of the products in the inner market. So that's not a question to the customs. They don't have the functionalities. They don't have an operative and investigative tools. How they will be able to identify a group of people that are organizing the illegal, transfer of products through the customs. Maybe that will be a functionality of the Bureau of Economic Security. I don't know. But it happens so that the customs was the one that is considered the major origin for the problems, but and everyone is keeps saying that the customs should fight this. And how customs is trying to do that, or to counter it with that? Well, the only solution for them is to make sure that the white businesses are paying more. Make and speaking that it's only the loan credit, and that's just simply more money paid for the white businesses, but that's not the concern of the customs. The customs office, they're simply trying to make sure that the state budget gets more. So, in the very end, the customs is making sure that more money is supplied to the state budget, and we have more problems for the white business. So, the work just for the sake of work, this is something that is being conducted regularly. Why? Because the state has no control over the chain of the product. They cannot fight against this smuggling of products. And any attempts of the state to criminalize the smuggling of products look like, a fuss, nothing else, because those limits provided under the new draft laws, they are so small, really. And whenever we are talking to representatives of the EU, they keep saying about catching big fish, that is, organizers of the smuggling, to analytically identify those people that are influencing these smuggled transfer of products. Instead, we're not catching those big fishes. And basically, they will instead they will try to catch on those who committed them small mistakes and things like that. And that's not the wonderful situation. I just wanted to say that, as the Vladimir mentioned before me, we are the representatives of the large companies that comply with all the laws prescribed. And whenever we're talking about the reform of the customs office, we promote the European values, approaches, and still how the customs may organize the customs control with all this simplification, since its major functionality is all about having more money for the state budget. And with these requests in place, they will still keep verifying all the documents. They will try to make sure that those white businesses would pay more for the state budget. And that's something to ensure they have a better reports. And these just formal numbers, official numbers, and they are going nowhere, really. I haven't heard a single case when a chain of smugglers would be investigated, because there is a logical problem for you. Yeah, there is a product, and it costs $100. Somewhere abroad, it was bought for $100. The invoice was $50, and then there was no fee for that. Under current currency control, how those additional $50 went on the account of that person who sold this. We have this currency control, how they've transferred those money to the account. Look, I know the unanswered, but I'm trying to provoke. We have an emotional panel, really. For those who are observing our streaming, I just want to commend. There are people without the microphones. They're saying that through offshores, look, whenever we are fighting against the smuggling, I've got another saying that the best friend of the smuggler is the exporter. Exporter, really, because someone has to overcome that difference in the amount. And this is the only one who can play with the expert. Why exporters? Because we have another part of the shadow market, that's agricultural shadows. Where are they taking the cash? They're taking the cash from the smugglers, because they are selling those products on the market that were produced in a shadowy way. So, who institutionally is capable of investigating at least a single chain? And we can see all of those chains in place. Saying that the customs is the guilty one? Hey, what's the what's the difference between the customs documents from registering the VAT payments and the tax declarations are registered automatically except for the analysis of risks and etc. We've harmonized the customs registration process. And that's right, that's correct. So I suggest we would have all those questions and comments after the briefings of the speakers. So I'd like to sort of make a certain conclusion. We would need to have an analytical approach to investigating the chains of supply of those smuggled goods. Without helicopter view over those processes, we won't be able to cope with the smuggling of the input. We have to look at all the chain, the whole chain, because if there is an import, then there is a lack of payment. There are illegal currency payments, then there is a hard cash. Someone accumulates that cash, and everyone knows one another. Everyone understands how it works. It's just that I agree to Vladimir and Svetlana. There is a lack of political will to have this fight because everyone is interested. That was not me who said that. I cited that. I quoted that. Okay, well, we can have more meetings like that and have discussions on forums like that. But still, I would like to say that there are several groups of influence in control of this process. And while they will still be in place, while all of that will remain in shadow, we'll keep fighting forever. So, welcome. We're all all consider ourselves Don Quixotes, and we'll fight the windmills. We'll be writing laws for bureaucrats, and they will talk to one another about how important process they have. They will try to then send more objectives for the customs, and the big fish they will still be available in place. Let's keep on positive. Our major task is to spread this information, to talk about this, not to silence all those challenges that we face with, and to provide the recommendations. And this year, the most number of our recommendations that were sent to the public agencies. We've sent 388 separate recommendations on the amendments to the legislation were accepted.
До ще одного аспекту тіньової економіки, і це саме питання неофіційного працевлаштування, нелегальна зайнятість. Разом, маючи серйозний сегмент такої проблеми, ми маємо дуже застаріле трудове законодавство, ще наш старий кодекс законів про працю. І я хочу передати слово Валерії, прокоментувати це.
Так, дякую, Світлано. Про те, що завдання наповнення бюджету пенсійного фонду дуже так крепко стоїть на порядку денному, говорили Володимир, Олександр, і ця задача не оминула і трудові відносини. Світлана правильно сказала, у нас дуже серйозна проблема з тіньовою зайнятістю, тому що сьогодні приблизно за офіційними даними Держстату, які були опубліковані на другий квартал 2021 року, кожен приблизно 5-6 українець працював неофіційно. Якщо говорити мовою цифр, це на 15,5 мільйонів офіційно працевлаштованих працівників припадає більше 3 мільйонів неофіційних працівників, тих, що працюють на договорах ЦПХ або взагалі без будь-яких документів. І, звичайно, проблема тіньової зайнятості і можливість отримання додаткових надходжень до бюджетів до пенсійного фонду цікавить владу, і різними методами влада намагається боротися з цим явищем.
We're trying to fight this notion because according to some calculations, the losses we're carrying, it's in around 130 to 150 billions per year. And this is a big number because when we discussed this on another panel, that's the number we got. So it's around like 155 billions. So the numbers are pretty much the same, and the government tried to fight it from different approaches, and they were trying to counter this. They're different ideas, different approaches, working with the labor fund to stimulate them, to stimulate the businesses that are working now in shadow to unshadow their business and to start employ people legally. And when we're talking about taxes, again, the problem they don't want to pay them. And this reminds me of something. If we remind that 2014, 2015, we had an attempt like that. Back then, the government decided to decrease the tax, the single social contribution tax. And if we take a look at that, that didn't really help and didn't have a lot of positive effect on the numbers of illegally employed workers. So nothing really happened. We didn't see any changes in the statistics. So talking about some new attempts trying to relieve the pressure that is now on the labor fund. So when they realized there was a negative experience, they tried to take a look at different options. So the cabinet of ministers that works with labor issues, they made a decision that was, by the way, twice cancelled by administrative courts. And due to that order, every year around third quarter, they need to run a campaign in order to counter unofficial employment. And in third quarter this year, there was a campaign. If you take a look at the reports of governmental labor, you can see that they found 11,500 of illegally employed workers. So this is not even 1% out of the numbers we mentioned before. So if you take a look at the dynamic, the amount of people that are working illegally, and you compare that to the official employment, we can see some positive effect. Except for running awareness campaigns, businesses, they start to agree and they start registering their their employers. We unfortunately don't have fresh numbers for today, but we can take a look at the statistics we had previously. So yes, after running such a campaign, the number of undeclared employees went down at around 100,000. But in the bigger picture, we got the problem with employment because it went up. So we cannot really say that we have a positive dynamics because those two facts are not directly connected. So that's why we need to consider some other options, because we cannot say as of today that something was implemented and worked out in a enough positive way. Because Svetlana mentioned we have the code we're using right now is pretty old. It dates back from 80s. So talking about positive sides, the governments understand the need, and government tries to take certain steps to fix this. Around 2 years, the cabinet of ministers had to work on different bills. We're not even talking about the labor code, but the political will aspect, we don't have the support. So that's why they decided to break it down to different rules and laws. So it was more than 10 different bills and laws for this matter. One of them was for the regulation of labor relationship, and we sent some of our recommendations and suggestions. But overall, we're concerned with the process of preparing this bill for the second reading, because they created a work group and they added different unions, businesses. Us as representatives of the community are also part of that group. And for 3 weeks of our work, more than 400 different different things we needed to consider. So we covered like around 100, and we can see that step by step. But the parallelization that we're talking about here, and it's even in the name of the bill, is moving. So I'm concerned that talking about the liberalization that we discussed in the first reading, and we really were expecting for it. So I'm concerned that it's only a name that it's left from this idea. So the increasing the role of labor contracts, increasing the improving those relationships, increasing the interest of businesses to follow these ideas. So that's why we're concerned. But there are some other positive bills. This one is about freelance activity and collective labor relationship and regulating the role of collective contracts and others, talking about, again, positive. Even though we're talking about positive, but there are some nuances, like legislation that foresees the relationship, the labor relationship, that could make it easier for businesses to operate. But we understand that people are used to go to the easiest option. So that's why we still have this problem. And again, another red flags. So once we were relieved after the third quarter, after the checkups on undeclared work, we started another work on reviewing the international relationship and international employees. So we could see that a lot of them were basically copied one from another and not really checked properly the data that was in it. And the inspectors, they went out to run the inspection with unplanned checkups. And this additional checkups for foreigners is also a big concern for us.
Процесі
There are positive and negative aspects in terms of deregulation, and we, as the representatives of the EBA, we're trying to actively participate in the process of drafting the draft law of the 3865 in order to keep that liberalization, the provisions of that regulation. So that's the situation as we see that. Thank you, Valeria. We're just, sharing all those troublesome information between of us, but in the same time, we're still hoping that we'll continue to work, and hopefully the liberalization will not only be in the title of the law, but in some provisions as well. So hopefully the members of the committee and the representatives of the companies will be actively participating in this process. And now I'd like to pass the floor to Yevgen, who will talk on other aspects of the regulatory pressure on the businesses. So thank you, Svetlana. I would like to go back to this topic of countering the smuggling of illegal import. And I'd like to go back to the research by the JFK that was already announced. And at the initiative of the EBA and the JFK, just recently there was a publication of another research results on how this illegal traffic or smuggling situation has changed if compared to 2019. Well, the scope of the shadow imports to Ukraine, well, as the research says, it dropped just slightly, but not because the state has interfered or there was a regulation of the market, but because of a natural phenomena, that is the coronavirus limitations that had an impact on the chains of importing the illegal products into Ukraine. But still, today we've heard an emotional phrase that fighting against trafficking or smuggling, that should be available in the market as well. At this point, I have to say that those legislative initiatives, in terms of fighting the smuggling, they won't have a significant impact on the situation. They won't be able to reduce the inflow of those smuggling. And in the same time, the fiscalization is something that is supported by 73% of the respondents. And speaking on the smuggling, there's minus 86% of the respondents who support this. One important aspect, we understand that smuggling is being sold on the market, or it's being sold through the most widespread chain, that is the e-shops. For example, the internet stores or internet shops, they're selling this shadowy products. And the consumers of the e-shops, if compared with the consumers going to the ordinary stores, they are deprived of the rights that are granted to them by the under the law for the protection of the rights of the consumers. Because whenever you are coming to an ordinary store of a major vendor, you can find all the documents saying who's selling you the products, at what basis, whether they're registered or not, and if lucky, you will get this fiscal invoice. That's the natural thing that should happen. That would be a support that you have signed a purchase and sale agreement. So in case of any problems with the product, you can contact the state services. You can ask for the protection of your rights. But whenever you are buying something at the e-shop, which is not widespread or which is not part of a big or large network, then you won't be receiving the fiscal invoice or the fiscal bill. In some cases, that would be something like a bill of lading signed by the economic entity. And personally, me and many of you who bought the products, and in some cases, we were offered to transfer the money to the bank account of a physical person. And in case of a sale, that would not be a confirmation that you've bought the product in this very e-store. So you won't find the information in this kind of store who's selling you the product. And going back to these sort of challenges, I'd like to underline that the market has offered a number of initiatives, and they were discussed by the ministries. Particularly, they were discussing the register of e-shops available in Ukraine. So at the public level, there was an initiative with regards to registering the e-shop. So every e-shop had to provide information about their addresses, about the economic entities, about those in control of this address, about how they're organizing their sales, and all the other information under the Article 7 of the law on e-commerce. What this will provide to these consumers. If that e-store will be identified properly, then the register or the state register will have them properly registered as the registered e-store. Then another initiative would be the press aggregator, the marketplaces, and they are posting information on the e-stores on their own websites. They have to indicate that those e-stores were properly registered. So whenever the buyer would buy any sort of product, or whenever they will be finding their products on marketplaces or in the e-shop, they would be able to see that, okay, that e-store is registered, and the state has an information on who is the legal entity. And therefore, this state may be able to protect the customer's rights if the customer would have the invoice from the e-store and buy the product, and if that buyer would go to the state service seeking the protection of his rights. So that initiative was supported by the business community, and hopefully this will develop further on. And maybe next year, even, it could be implemented at the legislative level. One more sort of challenge that our company tend to face, and maybe some other importers as well, are facing this year in particular, that is the need for acquiring license on the import of products that were produced while generating the greenhouse gases. So the state has to simplify the procedures for the business on the one hand, but on the other hand, it happens so that the need for acquiring this license in accordance to the legislation complicated the business. So the season of selling those air conditioner that has those greenhouse gases while their production. So the whole season of selling those air conditioners, it started a couple of months later, and only in June. And why that was the situation? Because the importers of the air conditioners were supposed to use the e-system under the Ministry of Economy to submit what level of gases they would import, and then they would submit this information for receiving the license. But unfortunately, the e-system was not working, and the Ministry of Economy really required to have a full package of documents that involved the information on the economic entity as well as all the agreements on the import of and the supply of products, including the agreements, the additions to those agreements, and attachments to those agreements. And our company has been operating since 2009, and those agreements were that we keep on working with, they were concluded in 2009 and 2010. So we supply products under 2 or 3 agreements, and should we sum up all the documents that were attached to those agreements, there is more than 30,000 pages of documents. And part of that are already archived, part of that could be lost. So in order to continue to proceed with our operation, we had to change our business schemes. We had to agree with the suppliers on the settling of new agreements. And when we finally got the license, we get another problems with the customs, because the license is being provided to the customs. The customs is being controlled based on these very agreements, and our business schemes required us to buy from the other vendors, and that was not provided by the license. So the business community asked the Ministry of Economy, the Ministry of Environment, asked to simplify their procedures. And if the legislation requires that statistics information, how many greenhouse gases were imported to Ukraine. So let us just limit that information to the amount of gases that we are intending to import. Let's not get into too much of details, like what is the price under which agreement, when it's going to be imported, at what prices. Look, the market is moving. The demand and supply is constantly changing. It's all turbulent. We cannot predict what would be the price in, I don't know, half a year, for example. And another challenge, and I guess the final one that I would like to raise today, and sorry for that sort of a large discussion. Well, I know we are sort of overwhelmed with these emotions. It took us a couple of months on those negotiations with the ministries. In some cases, it's not about simplifications, but still, we've seen a lot of regulatory and fiscal agencies to introduce the procedures that are physically something that could not be, fulfilled. But Yevgen, please. So the final challenge that I had, or I was willing to share with you, and something that we would like to have for the importers of the smartphones and TVs. That's the tax on smartphones and TVs paid by the producers for the possibility of the private copying in accordance to the law on the uh, property rights. Every importer that is being importing any devices with the capability of recording, they have to pay a special fee, which is identified by the committee. But the scheme is that those the money that are being paid, they're not being provided to the owners of the property rights, because in accordance to the research, 69% of the authors of songs, for example, they are not registered as the legal entities, and therefore the organizations of the collective management, whenever they're receiving the money, they are distributing those money among those who have an agreement signed with them. So the whole system is intransparent. That's right. And one more thing, in accordance to the research, is only 13% of the consumers are using the legal content. So if the law provides for the right on the private copying of the legally received content, then only 13% of consumers would be using that. Now, you might want to imagine how many percentage will be simply copying that content legally. So the organization of this collective management, they are not paying attention to that. Absolutely, they're saying that everyone should pay, and there's significant percentage that are required to be paid, and that's sort of considered as the compensation for the illegal content, and the importers of the electronics, they pay attention to the fact, like, look, the official importer cannot be held liable for the illegal import, and they compensate for what was not received. So thank you for that. Now the importers, they supported those legislative initiatives. For example, the draft law 4537 that provided for the for special accounting or registering or informational system, allowing the importers and the contractors to or the authors receive an information which sort of content was played, how many times, how many money or percentage they should be receiving. So that's a positive, I would say, legislative initiative. It provides for the limitation of the amount of equipment that would be used for paying that fee, because everyone is listening to the music. If that's an MP3 or they're watching the digital content, that's not tape scrapes or something like that. Thank you, thank you. Thank you. I understand that you're overfilled with emotions. You're willing to share them with us. Now I'd like to pass the floor to Yuri. And Volodymyr started really today with the fact that we have two taxation systems, and we were talking about the problems of the wine business, which is struggling because of the excessive administrative and taxation burden. And now I'd like to ask Yuri to present the results of your research with regards to misuse or abuses of the simplified taxation system. Well, since we have an emotional panel, I'd like to bring you some more details, but I will start with emotions. One of the economists who advocated the simplified taxes, he said that we are the EBA lobbyists, and he said that the EBA is willing to like neutralize that simplified users, but we had no impact on you, and we were not paying any money to use all. So this research was done together with the German economic team, and just want to go straight to the diagrams, and I will tell you what they're saying of. So in this economy, most of those processes they could be well described by the functions of the probability and density. In simple words, a lot of entrepreneurs, they have low income. The larger is the income, the smaller is the number of companies demonstrating that. So in most cases, you would see this type of diagram. So we've decided to get an information from the tax authorities about how the sole proprietors are registering, how the economy, how different businesses are registering their incomes, and look at different operational areas which they're registering it. So these are the data by the groups. I don't know if you can see the numbers, but that's not important. What is important is that we can see that the second group of sole proprietors, the data is provided as of 2019 and does not correspond to the actual situation. We'll have the research for 2020, 2021, and we can see that as for Group 2, the largest amount of companies register their income before the fiscalization. That could not be explained by other factors. It's either the sole proprietors are ceasing their activity because they've reached the limit, or they're registering the money they are willing to. And if you take a look at the third group, there are no anomalies like that. Why? Because the foundation or the most of the people in Group 3, these are IT, these are advisors and other sole proprietors that are demonstrating their actual income, and they're not manipulating with that. So we've decided to look at the different economic activities, and we came up with the coefficient of abuses, and it shows the percentage of the enterprises. I haven't demonstrated the expected incomes. So if the normal balance would say that there should be 2% of the entrepreneurs within this range, and there's 12 of them, then these 12%, these are the ones who commit any abuse. So what we have seen, in fact, the green dots and the orange dots, they represent different groups. And then there are other groups with VAT, without the VAT. So the largest abuses we have for group number 2, and look at the axis, we have demographic scale. So we can see that Group 2 is demonstrating separate, significant incomes on the retail and commodities sales, on the processing. They have a largest percentage of abuses. So the whole Group 3, with and without VAT, it's up to 10 to 15% of anomalies. And you can see on the bottom, along the x-axis, you can see the information and communication. This is something that is used by the IT representatives, so they don't have any manipulation with the incomes. Now, we can see that the largest risk of abuses, if compared to the large incomes, this is something that we can see with the group number 2. So these 3 economic activities, we've identified them separately, and you can see what are the anomalies in terms of registering the incomes. There is a significant peak before then 1 million, and then there is a peak just before the limit of the turnovers. So you can imagine how many limits. And some of the summaries and recommendations. I really support the words of the Alexander that indeed fighting against the smuggling with taxation, it should start on the market, really. And this is something that is not being spoken vastly. How this people using the simplified taxation service, how they're abusing that. I know that many of you are aware of this scheme, but it's important that we keep on talking about this. We have an importer, even it's an official importer, and we have a large producer or manufacturer that is producing, I don't know, dishwashers or something like that, or solutions for dishwashing. And in fact, a lot of his chain of supply are not wide. And some of them are, been sold on the market, and they're either rejecting this segment or working with them. What they will receive in case of working with them, he will receive a lot of cash from its distributors, and he would receive some virtual stockpiles. I mean, he would have some products on the warehouse according to the papers, but in fact he doesn't have that. So now he would be searching a counter agent who would be needing a taxation credit, and he would be willing to transfer the money to the bank account of that manufacturer, someone who's providing the services and receiving like tax obligations, and he has money on the bank account. So that's a classical operation. He transfers the money to the bank account of that manufacturer, of the importer. He received cash minus half of the tax credit. They've divided the tax credit in between of them. So that's the case for the counter agent. If he's paying the salaries in cash, he's got no problems. If he's working using the wide procedures, then he can provide some financial support. There's different options. But what the essence of that? I keep thinking that we don't have a proper understanding, particularly within the policymakers, willing to change something, that this simplified taxation, it promotes the VAT schemes, and without this proportion, we'll have less problems with them.
Це гіпотеза,
Yes, so we need to check this idea on practice. In our research, it was concentrated on the quantity analysis of the reports we got. So that's what we got from this research, that we need to pay attention to small businesses. So basically, this is people that are really working for themselves. So we need to give them the opportunity to work. We need to support them, but be aware that there are some people that could be abusing those rules. And another recommendation, not really popular, but in order to operate for the third group, they should have mandatory VAT, because a lot of countries use VAT, not sales tax. Why? Because it gets the businesses and it helps to stabilize the workflow throughout the whole chain and increases the chances to make all the businesses white. So if someone is selling something on the market, some household goods, they would know that they would need to ask for documentation, and that would help us in this change. So some problems that we discussed with some officials that are working in this area. So it's to that this is going to discourage the involvement in the sale of contraband. So, and what we discussed, that we need to refocus this groups 1 and 2 on micro businesses by dramatically restricting allowed activities and the following criteria you can see on the screen. So it's easy to say, but it's not that easy to find the working criteria to tell white businesses from shadow businesses. If someone knows any, please come and share, or to the Ministry of Finance, and suggest some ideas, because for a long period of time they seem to be lost. And I think they're more concentrated right now on how to improve this simplified taxation system according to the legislation 864 that is now registered in the Parliament. So basically, it is increasing the limits of this simplified taxation system to like 30 billion. And I think that this could be possible to, let's say, shift the metal business on this system. Yeah, so let's wrap it up. Okay, I'm going to finish what I wanted to finish with. There is a draft now that is being discussed with the tax committee. It's not yet reviewed in the parliament, but most likely it will get the support and get registered. So this is about some tools that is going to come in hand. So concentrate more on risks, high-risk industries. It's the mechanisms on giving the customers the incentive to ask for documentation, for receipts, and also it foresees some of the aspects of on working with this black businesses, with shadow businesses, how to make them go out of that shadow. And yeah, it's actually was not even mentioned in your research. Yeah, so that's an example when you're talking about this. And you know, when there's two people, so one is working legally and another one is working in a shadow, it's hard to find the perfect way to help in this situation. So I know there is a draft that is saying that the ones that are working in shadow, so the tax authorities have the right to use some sanctions and to continue sanctioning the ones that are working in the shadow. But we know that a lot of businesses are working in shadow. So I just wanted to mention that some work was being done. Thank you, Yuri. So now we're moving to questions, please.
Редько Вячеслав.
Hello, my name is Redko Vyacheslav. I'm representing the the Chamber of Free Trade. So starting from 1991, I'm in business, and I think that we have only like 10 businessmen. All the others are entrepreneurs. So talking about political will, we have it, but with a minus. And all of those interests, they're concentrated to control us. Talking about sole proprietorship. So it used to be like a fresh air to us when we really needed it, but nowadays it turned into such a negative thing. And going to, and we're all taking part in this new system, and everyone, the customers and businesses, and until we have this fiscal receipts problem figured out, we will not have it solved. I'm really happy that civil society is now getting more active and trying to fight this problem. And thank you for gathering and talking about such issues. I'd like to see us getting to the logical way out of this situation, as you mentioned, different approaches, more kind approach and more punitive. So I just want to say, as an sole proprietors, that I will be in the shadow until there's some advantage to me to go out, because no one is going to do this. So 15 years ago, I'm going to tell a small story, very short, because 15 years, it could be, very long. No, it's the other story. So for 1 month, I made a mistake as a sole proprietor. So when I took the money, the accountant took the money and put it on our funds. And when inspectors came to check me, and then we were working with this problem with cash. You remember this period in our life, right? Yeah. Yeah, everything is archived, and I left all the documents on the Donbas region, so there's nothing on me. So I was surprised when they told me that I had to pay a 500,000 fine. What do you mean? I paid so much money to get this income in a white zone, but the problem was that you put this money on your card not from the name of the customer but on your own name. So using some of these things, those are not good for us, for businesses. So okay, there are yeah. So if I may, I'll not send out Oleg Kiselovsony. So I have a small comment about custom service. I don't agree with this idea that customs has nothing to do with this problem, because when we see how trucks with some smuggling getting into the country, there's some TVs, washing machines, and we cannot talk about this like it was some jackets that was somewhere hidden in your pocket and no one noticed. So something is going on, but this is the true black smuggling. And the same with these containers in Odessa, our favorite 7th kilometer. Some systems are settled right now there to sell those black products. And even some of the streets in Kiev, we can see in subways when they're selling different fake products, faking some popular companies. So I don't think that any of those processes could happen without the customs service and their attention. So one of the tools that could help us, the legislation and the issue we're having on markets, but we also need to consider the customs. Yeah, so the customs reform is one of our priorities. May I? Yeah, just half a minute, please, 30 seconds. Microphone is working? Yes. So, no. Okay. So, the answer is simple. When customs is focused on filling our budget, they don't have enough money, they don't have enough resource and time to be working on what you just mentioned, because this would be the work for customs. Yes, I can agree with this. They need to focus their attention and time in order to do their work and in order to watch the processes that are going on the borders. They don't have enough time because we have our functions that we need to perform, because what you just mentioned and checking the products is one of the main functions of custom service. But when they're thinking about how do we control our budget and filling our budget, they don't have enough time, money, and focus to be performing their direct duties, because you're thinking, okay, so where should I add some value in order to help this problem? And you're not thinking about what direction people are using, the smugglers are using to get the products through. So again, as I mentioned, not all businessmen are super white and clear. Not all the not all the border workers services. But when we're talking about getting the country to the state we need and achieving those goals, we need to understand that this service has to be focused on their direct duties, because we will not fight the problems we're having unless we consider that. In Odessa, there's a saying, there's a purple color of the 7th kilometer. So there's a saying in Odessa. And another problem that is connected to the recent reform in customs, because before the reform, we had some requests as a company and we could identify some issues. Now, customs, they're using their own judgment how to identify those cases. And a lot of things are left unnoticed now, because a lot of different batteries, headphones, and everything could be found pretty much anywhere. So, yeah, we could talk about this for 2 more hours. Yeah, will not do this. I just wanted to leave a couple of comments to Eugen, maybe questions. First thing, not only to Eugen, but talking about the GFK research, and especially the research and the poll that was dedicated to the last year, because it's true, last year, related to the COVID restrictions, we had a decrease in numbers. But right now, I think the situation got even worse. And the level of this shadow activity got even higher, maybe even more than it was pre-COVID times. And a lot of businesses went online because we know that a lot of shopping malls, stores, they were closed. So the retail and trade moved to online. It gave this push for businesses to move to e-commerce, but we know that the black products in those stores also got bigger in numbers. So I think that the situation is even worse. And I just wanted to comment about what you mentioned earlier. So it's the same thing we have with internet, that the mechanisms for royalties, they're directly connected to hardware. So it's 80s, 90s, back then when hardware were using cassettes and discs, and where they could copy different video and audio products and sell it. Now it's all moved to internet. It's also mentioned in one of the researches, not GFK, but the Kiev School of Economic. Yeah, I missed those two. So it is mentioned there, and the system of collecting this data itself needs to be reformed and to reviewed, because right now it's not working. So we need to start considering maybe canceling it at all or changing it completely, because there are some streaming services that are being used right now, some mobile apps. So no one is copying anything on the gadget itself, and computers or discs like it was like 5 years ago. Yeah, thank you for this comment. So talking about some electronic gadgets, yes, so the consumer has to pay 2 times, because by buying this USB flash drive and the smartphone itself, they actually need to pay for both of those things. And or whether they're using some services like YouTube Premium or something else. Yes, this is true, and we're working towards this. So thank you for commenting on this. Dear colleagues, I think we need to finish our first panel. We will continue. We will be going more deep into each industry, but I want to say that we have some positive and initiatives for this purpose, and we want to thank you, the Ministry of Digital Transformation, for their work. There are new legislations and the initiatives, but unfortunately, we're not seeing some systematic positive initiatives, and we have a full chaos of negative initiatives, and unfortunately, they don't make it better for us, but only make it worse for transparent business. So thank you, everyone. So I would like to ask our new panel.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we will proceed and we'll have another panel. Second panel, we'll be discussing separate sectors. So now we'll have our first infographics. We talked about the losses of the state budget because of this shadow economies. That is the this lack, according to experts, has been amounted to 155 billion hryvnia. That is 155 billion hryvnia. That's according to our gross assessment. So these are the largest losses of the state budget. They're coming from the illegal sales of the clothes. I'd like to introduce the panelists: Serhiy Batrudinov, the CEO of Intertop; Vasil Hryb from Foxtrot; Mikhailo Kotovenko, the Group Sub Ukraine CEO; the Alexander Samokhvalov, the Lusdorf, and the head of our dairy committee, Alexei Bridun, the company Roost Ukraine; and Gitautas Dirgela, that's coming from GDI Ukraine. And since the illegal trade of boots and or shoes and clothes that is bringing the largest losses to the state budget. So Serhiy is the one that suffers the most from this situation on the market. So could you comment on the turnarounds, on the scopes, on which tools could we use to fight that situation? And we keep talking about fiscalization, the introduction of different fiscal tools. Should I be emotional or not? You can do anything. Well, first and foremost, we know that our state has a very particular attitude towards the wine businesses, which is not actively changing. But from the point of fiscalization, at least we should be grateful for that decision to be taken. What is happening? In order to find this, and I don't quite agree with all the previous panelists, speaking on the labor code, that needs to be simplified, really, on one hand. On the other hand, we need to reduce the burden on these white businesses. I don't know where my colleague is. Oh, okay. And then we would get more, because the reform of the unified social contribution, it allowed to have more money into the budget in a year. Speaking of the customs, that's the same story, really. We keep saying that the customs are the result of default. On speaking on the import of the shoes and clothes, there are several large importers that exist for 1 year and then they disappear. So we clearly understand that they are the one that is one of the contributors of those schemes that everyone has been talking about. Those are the importers that offering the lower price, like 2 times lower the price or 10 times lower the price. So the Intertop, from the standpoint of the import, we have something like 20% of the market in terms of the turnarounds, but in fact, we have only 2 or 3% of the market. So the state has to be in control. From the standpoint of fiscalization, what has been done 2 years ago? We had like 30 years of operation, and please all read the Greek myth, because when the Heracles cleared those stables, it appeared that those tables were not cleared for 30 years before that. And that was written, by the way, in those myths. So we've passed that sort of situation. We weren't clearing our stable for 30 years. So now 2 years ago, the state said that we will have no barriers. We will have the cash registers, software-based cash registers. And we've passed to that together with Andrei. And over the half a year, we can already see that over the October, well, according to our information, there's more than 60 million invoices and over 140,000 software-based cash registers were registered. So those cash registers, they're wonderful, really, because I save at least 5,000 hryvnia per year on each of the cash register. So the state is saying, okay, install the cash register. That's not that expensive. Something like 100 hryvnias for the installation. That's more than enough. You can do that on your own, or you can switch the connect to the public service, which is not perfect, or use the services of others. There's no penalties. There's no bugs. There is only one penalty for not providing the invoice. What else do the people need? So we need to tell the state, we need to tell Mr. Danilov that we penalize for his some of the draft laws, saying that fiscalization is good, and he supports us. We have to come up with that. We have to say that we are supporting fiscalization. We understand who are the people addressing them. These are those importers, large importers that disappear after a year. And they've organized those people with banners or these flags. And then there is a delay in the entry into force of those cash registers initiative in a year. Speaking about the change in the with the limits for the sole proprietor, that's a wild initiative. Or saying that we're not going to have the tax registers here and then we'll have them otherwhere. That's a problem. Those cash registers, there's something that needs to be installed. And full stop. That's something we have to introduce since the beginning of the next year. Then there is another challenge. That's a comprehensive issue. Only part of the people, and I was fairly surprised. We have a large boots or shoes store, a large one on Khreshchatyk, 3,000 square meters, and everyone represented in that store is a sole proprietor. And they're being checked by the taxation agency. Everyone is working illegally. There is no invoices. There is a store of 3,000 square meters, and they're saying like, "Hey, this is the market store, so let's develop a legislative that would call us a marketplace." Hey, if you are supporting Ukraine, we understand what was happening like 1 day ago, 2 days ago, and our custom, in our taxes that we are paying for the state is something that is absolutely efficient. So let's all have the cash registers. If you're a small sole proprietor, if you're a small sole proprietor of a second group with up to 1 million of income or up to 1.5 million of income per year, if you have a larger turnaround, then go to another group or go to the general taxation system. That's a very important reform. And something that we need, something that our state needs, something that the wine businesses need. And speaking on the wine and textile, like something like 70% of sellers are operating in the shadow sector. We know how they've imported their products. We know how people get their salaries. That's a large paint, really. And you need to, well, fill it in, to level it. As we, as the society, we cannot develop without tackling with those problems. And we need to introduce that fiscalization. We, as the ABA, as the wine business, we truly support this. We understand that it's all simple. There's nothing, to worry about. And everyone will be of a benefit out of that. So our position as the ABA has to be the following. Look, there is an idea. There was another draft law on the cashback when the society would be controlling the generation of the invoices. and then it was, was abolished or that draft law, and now they're saying that there will be an inspections by the tax authorities. Yesterday, one of the bloggers who is dealing with the tax authorities, and he bought 5 iPhones during the Black Friday, and he hasn't received a single invoice, even though over a year ago there was an introduction of the legislation when it was obligatory to provide invoices. Well, in accordance to the law, starting from the 1st of January, they had to provide invoices on electronics and jewelry. Try to buy jewelry for anyone for the new year. There's only, 2 networks that belong to our group that provide the invoices. But the other sellers, even the major sellers, they're not providing you with the invoices. So without the civil control, without the cashback, nothing will be working. Like I'm ready to invest in that. In Kazakhstan, we have colleagues, and they keep saying that they have some competitions or special like offers when the invoices, the official invoices are participating in a sort of a competition, allowing one of them to win. I don't know, a car, for example. So we need to come up with any actions to promote the society to ask for those invoices. I mean, we're working in a company. We have 300 people in the office, and even in our company, not everyone understands what the invoices are, because what those sellers are doing. They're making an invoice. It looks like a fiscal invoice, but it's not a fiscal invoice. It's not something that is on the website of the tax authorities. They just provide a piece of paper and nothing else. And the state is not dealing with that. So we need to offer the society with the levers to fight with that. I'm taking too much of my time, I guess. Sorry for that. But still, our position as the EBA should be as of the organization that combines the efforts of over 1,000 companies, and we have to say aloud that we support the fiscalization. We should not delay that in any manner. We should not hide it behind anything. This is something we need to implement, then give it a small kind of a trial period, and then start verifying and inspecting that all around. Thank you. Thank you, Sergey. I was very touchy. It's just that recently everyone keeps saying about their rights, and maybe you've seen that sort of trend in the social networks. I have a right, I have constitutional rights, and I've got violation of my constitutional rights. And sir, he did mention that before this time, the population are never actually told about the protection of their rights and consumers. But the fiscal invoice is the one that provides you with the right to use their right. Whether you need to vaccinate or not to vaccinate, that's a decision everyone has to take for themselves. But to return their money or your money as the consumer for any improper products, that's also a right. And last year we talked about this. We wanted to make sure we're asking there would be no delays in the introduction of the cash registers. And what Yuri mentioned also about the new legal initiative on promoting the consumers to control the receipt of these fiscal invoices. The cashback, on the way, is a very good instrument, and it worked well in other countries in terms of promoting consumers to demand those fiscal invoices. And whenever we start asking why any granny on the market which is selling something in Asia, it's not a problem for her to provide an invoice because she got the cash register. And the companies with the turnaround of around 1 or 1.5 million tends to say that it's so difficult for them to offer the fiscal invoice. Now we go to Mihailo. So Mihailo, can you please introduce a few commands and going back to all this household electronics? What's the situation from your side? Well, I tend to agree with much of the comments that I've heard before, and in some cases, we need to concentrate on our analysis more. And at any market, not only on the market of electronics and domestic products, there are equal rights for everyone, which promotes the economy to development and not to search the gaps for receiving benefits for ones and receiving problems for the others. And me, as the representative of the French company group SAP, I'm for the equal and transparent rights to everyone, because the large companies, they're paying all the taxes. The large networks selling electronics, they're paying the taxes, while at the same time there are gray areas or shadowy businesses that are developing in the internet. And for them, the fiscal invoice, that's something strange. They might offer you something that may look similar, or they may not offer you at all. And for the buyer, for the client, in some cases he's saying, oh, I would save like 20 or 30% of the price. But in fact, that could be only a trap, because that product might be like a black product or a shadowy product that was smuggled into the territory of Ukraine or on a bus, or I don't know, they might get it from somewhere, they might hate it, they might drop it, and then the person bought that product, and without the invoice, they won't have it. They can't get to the service center for the maintenance because they don't have an invoice. And so the consumer is trying to save the money. In fact, they're losing a lot of the money. That is why the fiscalization, and more particularly the fiscalization of the e-commerce, this is something that would make sure that the consumer would be buying the legal products, and that if something would happen to those products, he would be able to repair or maintain them, and the law would be able to protect them. So the law is the shadow market, and I don't know what should be the right or the best scope of that shadow market, like 2 or 3% or 5%. But the lower it is, the better it is the situation for the state budget. Then the easier for us would be to import the regional products through these customs, through the borders. So all the sellers, they would need to understand that they would need to identify themselves. They would not be risking their image by selling the shadow products. And therefore I believe that fiscalization is a must-have issue. And for the market of all types of electronics, the lower is the shadow market, the better is the situation for all the suppliers. And I can have a small presentation on GFK. There's just several slides and just sort of a brief overview. What can we see for 2020, 2021? There is a significant share of the shadow market. That's the electronics, accessories, headphones, other acoustics, TVs, smartphones, and we know that we got new iPhone sooner than the official distributors. And what the colleagues underlined, there was a drop in the shadow market in 2021, but that's not because the state is acting, that's because there are certain limitations because of the COVID. Now, the assessment of the gray market, and we believe it's something around 18 billion because of the COVID. In the previous year, there were over 20 billion. But that's sort of a surprising indicators. And now imagine how much money was not transferred to the state budget. And there are experts to deal with that, hopefully, in the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Economy. And what's the most interesting? The most widespread schemes, these are the people who are traveling back and forth through the border, then improper information in the registration papers. That's something that helps the smuggled goods to be transferred to Ukraine. And I agree with those colleagues who are saying that simply focusing our attention on the customs is not enough to have a result. We need to control the final production to the final users, because if there will be no demand for the counterfeit products, then there will be no smuggling. And I guess that's it that I have.
Thank you, Mikhaila. Now, Vasily, you wanted to mention some good examples where cash registers were used. Yes, I will be mostly paying attention on positive sides and positive thinking, because we mentioned a lot of negative aspects, but a lot of good things are also here to discuss, and a lot of businesses are not still using cash registers, and we want them to understand that this is not hard, this is not expensive, and it gives them new opportunities, opens new doors, they give them more opportunities for their business operations in different spheres. So I'll still start with a small negative side to it. There is a research on the screen. You can see it's from the Consumers Assembly in Ukraine from 2020, and the problem here about this paper or a fiscal receipt, I just want to emphasize that we have a service that is running right now, tax.gov.ua, where you can check different receipts that you received, whether this is a legal document or it's just a simple paper that was printed out. So you can see the statistics on the screen on different electronics. And you can see that from this receipts that were checked, only 84% were real. And again, as I promised, let's talk about positive things. We have some good legislation initiatives and some good laws and rules that gave us opportunities to work with fiscal receipts. Back in 2017, there was a new law foreseeing and regulates the procedure of giving out the fiscal receipts and makes it mandatory. Then in 2019, we received an opportunity to work not only with this, as we call the metal cash registers, but with also programmed cash registers. And this gives us an opportunity to be transparent as a business and to show that we're working transparently and officially. And if a customer has this fiscal receipt, they are protected. They know that we are guaranteed to provide them with this service. And for us, as for business, this is an advantage to get more customers. So I wanted to share some interesting statistics, not to brag, just to show advantages for businesses. So for last year, we transferred 100% of our stores to program cash registers. For us, it's 169 stores that are completely now on this program cash registers. And we also launched some cash registers that could be used autonomous by a client, and included some options for delivery. A good case here is when you come to a store and you know, we have this notion of customer journey. First, we come up to this to the manager or to the consultant, then we're getting our product receipt and then go back home. But nowadays in our stores, when you're paying with your card, you can even skip some of the steps. So all the steps you need to follow in order for you to get the product, you can do by yourself. You receive an invoice, you purchase the product, and just right after you receive the receipt, and it's going to stay with you in electronic version. You can go home with your product. So in this case, we save time for a customer to spend it in our store. They don't need to stand in lines to get to the register. As for me, this is a negative experience, especially when we're talking about some special sales like Black Friday or Christmas. It generates a lot of lines. So there are some situations where we need to work with cash. So we would, again, make it as usual and go to cash registers, to cashiers. And but talking about the time that a client spends at the cashier desk in order to pay, we've seen the increase in cases where we use cash registers. It's 3 times less time. So it's around like 50 seconds to be done with the procedure for a client, while it was so much longer with this metal cash registers. And talking about the paper that was used for those receipts, it's 185 kilometers, or if we're talking about A4 format, and 740 kilometers if we're talking about the regular size of a receipt. So if we sum it up, that's 3.5 tons of wood that we were able to save. So it's not only saving up for you, but it's also being it's also caring about the environment. Yes, so I just want to mention that clients and consumers, not necessarily it's easy for them to work with these changes. We had a number of calls last year with issue with not receiving a receipt for the product, and we had to answer and to explain that you have your receipt in your personal logging on our website. It's in electronic version. You will have it, so everything is okay. We had to go through this. So talking about this program, cash registers and electronic receipts seems to be taken well by customers, and it also we can see some advantages for customers here. First of all, it's customer security. It's easy to scan the QR code, follow the link, and easily check whether this is just a paper or a real fiscal receipt. Different options on how to receive this receipt, and again, different kinds of checking whether this is a real document. You can get it on your email, or you can send it as an image, show it on your phone, or generate a QR code, or print it out, or send through messengers, and all of this will work as a proof of this fiscal receipt. And talking about QR codes, I think that's one of the easiest ways, because you can scan it with your smartphone and right from there get on the website where you can check whether this is an official receipt. I think that everyone in this room encountered the problem when you lose your fiscal receipt. So it was real, but let's say for the time you used your gadget, you have no idea where you left it when you need it. And if there's something that you want to get with your guarantee coverage, you have no idea where to look for this receipt, so you can prove that you actually bought it. So, and that's why using this program with electronic receipts, it's so much easier, because it's saved, it's always there in your personal logging. And again, as I mentioned, for a consumer, a big advantage is the speed of the operations that the store needs in order to process one client, right? So they can go back home faster and start using the product they just purchased. So if we don't want the receipt on paper, that's a choice for a customer to be environmental friendly, because they make this choice not to get the paper that is going to be bad for the environment. So yes, thank you. Very interesting information, not only interesting but useful, and for those who maybe was not that into program cash registers and these electronic receipts. And now I want to give the word to Alexander, the head of our milk committee, because it's also a question for them, for milk industry. Yes, checking the mic. So I represent Milk Committee in European Association, and we're working with recycling milk. So because there are two parts, right? The ones that are producing milk and the ones that are recycling it. So now we see ourselves in a almost critical state. Why? Because in Ukraine, we have only so much milk production, the raw milk production. And if 10, 15 years ago, we were one of the leaders on milk production and had millions of income per year. And now we can see that we're only getting 3 million tons of milk this year. Why? Because the materials that we need in order to produce and in order for this to be environmental friendly, and we're talking about different products like sour cream, butter, milk, products for kids and others. So why this situation has came to this point where Ukraine, from being leaders, went down to the need to import milk production, milk goods. So I think that around some we can see that we have a pretty noticeable percentage of milk products that we can see on the shelves right now that is being imported. And we know that in Ukraine, the materials needed to produce milk one of the most expensive in the world, and the businesses that are working with us, they really suffer from this because the prices went down. And except for Ukraine, I think Malta and some other small country that is also having such troubles with milk production. So talking about the medium-sized businesses that work efficiently would be, so for the businesses that work pretty efficiently, it would be like around 50%. And you could think this is a good number, but why this is happening, I think it's connected to the fact that we have a lot of shadow in our agricultural business that is connected directly to production, to export, and to development of this industry. And for those, I'm not sure how to put it right, but for the ones who doesn't have any land, they're not interested for this industry to be improved, because it's so much easier to put different kinds of cultures to our soil than just gather all of the products and just sell it and don't even think about other things, because this is hard work and all the processes that they need to do in order to produce the.
So what do we have? We have not so many milk, and it's fairly expensive. One other thing that leads to another challenge: if the product is that expensive, then there is a great desire to produce or to have a counterfeit product. What is most important for those who are trying to, falsify the product? There's other important aspects that, or minerals that are there in the milk. That could be oils of natural and other origin, and that results in a situation when many products are having certain distrust on the part of the consumers, and some of the producers of the dairy products, they are using the actual raw materials, and they could not compete in terms of the price with those who are offering the counterfeit products. because in some cases, what the other or the shady businesses are offering, they are not offering the real products, but they can provide with a lower price. So we've suggested to come up with an initiative to do the monitoring of the quality of 3 dairy products, which are the most famous. This is the butter, the oil cream, and the sour cream. So we've decided to cooperate with the public agency, and they've bought some butter, the sour cream, in different stores, and they've submitted that for the analysis to the independent laboratory, and the results were unsatisfactory. Over 30% of the products which are sold in the supermarkets, those are the products that contain a number of counterfeit or falsified ingredients, and we've tried to contact our competent authorities who are supposed to control that and monitor the situation. We've contacted the Ministry for Agriculture. We've organized roundtables. We've invited the state consumer service. We've invited representatives of the state tax authorities, the anti-monopoly committee, the Ministry of Interior. We told them about this. We've reported that, but as the result, we were told that, oh, you've did such a good job. Well, keep on doing that. But our competent authorities, unfortunately, cannot respond in any case because they don't have the authorities to counter with that situation. So, unfortunately, that's the case. And of course, we would like to have more support from the state, and there would be a reinforced control over what's being produced, how it's being sold, and what do we see on the shelves in the stores to be consumed by the citizens of Ukraine. Now I'd like to pass the floor to Serhiy Bredun from the Rust Ukraine, and we'll be talking about one of the entities, record-breaking entities, as you can see from our infographics in the beginning of this panel, something like 20 billion of hryvnia were not transferred to the state budget because of the shadowy entities at the alcohol market of Ukraine. Yes, today I'd like to speak on behalf of the importers of the EBA and to focus your attention on the catastrophic situation on the market of alcoholic beverages, as the Ukrainian market is having its harsh times over the past 10 days. And according to the researchers, in 2010, the amount of market was reduced by 50% until the 2021. And first of all, according to the international experts and the representatives of public authorities, the alcoholic, at least half of the entities in the field of alcoholic beverages are in shadow. And vodka shows the harshest trend over the past 10 years. And starting from 2012, the market decreases by 8 to 10% annually. One of the key reasons for reducing or shrinking of the vodka market is all about the catastrophic development of the shadowy products in the market. And according to experts, there's 60% of vodka which is sold in a shadowy practices, and it's being produced because of the illegal production of the spirit on the public enterprises. And this is something that is widespread in Ukraine, and the market of Ukraine has dropped by 19% over the past 10 years. And the consumption per a single person was reduced by 1 liter. At the same time, the shadow market increased by 8%, and the consumption has increased per single person by 2.2 liters. and the production was decreased by 155 million liters. Am I understanding that correctly? So, according to the statistics, the legal consumption is reducing, but the actual consumption is in fact increasing. That's right. The share of sales on the shadow market has increased from 25 to 58% over the past 10 years. So the major indicators for the large or rapid increase of the shadow market of vodka is the constant increase of the price for the white vodka, let's say, because of introducing of different fees by the state. And in fact, it has increased by 166%. And the other fees were also tripled. And this is an effective tool of having more money for the state budget, but it works only when all the vodka, all the alcohol beverages are sold in white. So the illegal vodka usually sold at 35 to 50 hryvnias, which is 2.5 times less than the white vodka. In our case, we're paying at least 30 hryvnias as the fee to the state. So a lot of people are reducing many incomes. And currently, the public agencies are not performing their monitoring control actions. So the losses for the state budget in 2021 was something around 9 billion as the fee, and then there were another 13 billion losses because of the lack of payment of the VAT. That's for vodka, right? Yes, all the alcoholic beverages amount to produce a loss in the amount of 20 billion hryvnia. Now, what are our proposals? Well, first of all, we would need to finalize the program on privatization of the state esprit factories or alcohol products. So that would have an impact on the production of vodka. Then we would need to have a cooperation with the white producers in order to have a better regulation of the white businesses. That would have more. That would result in more taxes paid to the state. There has to be control over the production of the alcohol as well as the alcoholic beverages factories. We need to stop the production of alcohol, illegal alcohol, at the small and medium enterprises as well as the uncontrolled enterprises. Then we need to create the civilized conditions for e-commerce. Then we have to come up with the law on the trading or selling alcohol through stores. There has to be licenses in place. Besides, we would need to develop a mechanism for blocking the websites that would not be entered into the register. We need to have a transparency in terms of procedures of how do we maintain those of the alcoholic beverages that were seized. And there has to be a register of enterprises with the right to dispose the seized alcoholic beverages. And one more thing, the last but not the least, I would say, we are against introducing any tools that would be providing the registration of every single bottle, as this would require some significant human and financial resources. This would result in the increase of price at the white market, and that would only result in the further increase in the share of these shadowy products. We call upon the government and those decision makers to have a more detailed dialogue with the representatives of the business. Now we are going to talk about the tobacco. So GDI, please, what's the situation with smoking? Um, so do we have the same situation? The shadow demand increases, but the actual demand, well, increases. So yeah, now we have a very similar situation to what was happening with the market of alcoholic beverages. Tobacco tends to go with vodka very much. So we do have a challenge, and that challenge is being increasing. We started talking about this back in 2018, and people were saying like, look, you have 1% of the illegal market, while vodka has only 3%, and we kept saying that that problem will increase. We told about this. Now, what is the situation as we see it right now? Well, the situation is looking troublesome because the shadow market, the share of the shadow market increases. We already have around 18%. And that means that all of those shadow practices are fairly organized. And we are doing some regular researches of the shadow market in Ukraine. And this is done by an independent company 4 times per year. So they're doing the research of the market. They're gathering different packs of cigarettes, whether being produced, whether they are illegal or illegal. So it's an actual trend. It could be different by a couple of percentages back and forth, but the trend is fairly clear and non-debatable. Now, what's raising most of our concerns, we can see on this graph that the portion in red, that's the shadow market, and we can see which other parts are there, and only a small share of the market, that's the smuggled goods through the border coming from Belarus, I don't know, from UAE or from Kyrgyzstan. The rest are counterfeit products that are produced illegally in Ukraine. Look, that's a serious concern, or at least should be a serious concern for those parties that should have a control over that. And what's the most interesting, we told that the illegal smuggling would increase, and I have less expertise in terms of that. But those people who are aware of ICAs, that looks like a very unique product that could hardly be, produced illegally. But at the same time, based on our researchers, there are already a lot of counterfeit products that have been supplied to Ukrainian market. So that's the trend that's rise because of the popularity of ICAs. Now, you want to ask for reasons? Now, I can give you a reason why there is an increase in the share of the shadow market. Now, this is all because the amount of excise payment increases by 20 or 30% by every year. Now, with all this, inflation was high. We could understand why the excise tax has increased that much. Now, there is an inflation of less than 10%, and still the excise label has been increasing. And therefore, the smugglers or shadowy producers, their share keep increasing, and the demand for this product is being increasing because the users, the consumers, they simply don't have the money to buy the white products. And we've showed you the infographics saying how much money were allocated to the state budget in every industry, like clothes, 40 billion, vodka, like 20 billion or 16 billion. Now, tobacco would give another 60 billion or something. And ideally, should we close Ukraine, right? Close the borders, absolutely. So that there would be no illegal market, absolutely. Then we would say that Ukrainians have something like 150 billion hryvnia under their beds, and they would not be not giving that sum of money to the state budget. So the desire of the state to get more taxes from the white business is not always justified, really. We need to fight the root causes, and increasing the excise level by 20% per year, that's too much. And we are, approaching that concrete wall. And I would like to finalize by giving you some more information. This is how much resources the country is spending on the solution of illegal commerce in tobacco, and we understand that the state is losing a lot because some of the entities are not paying taxes, and then all the resources that the state has received are being spent for controls and things like that, because they would need to support the operation of the law enforcement agencies, right? So the state pays once again in order to solve this problem. So we are saying that we need to stop. We need to think of how not to create this problem in the first place. I'm not saying that we need to stop the operation of law enforcement agencies. No, absolutely not. We are grateful for what they are doing right now, but it's all about the root causes. And the root cause is the significant increase of the amount of excise labels.
Наверное, все.
So I think that's it. So do I understand you right that you have pretty much the same situation like we do when the government wants to get more money to their budget, they increase your excise, and which makes it less possible to operate on this market, and each next step of the government only makes it worse for the white businesses and for the bona fide businesses. Unfortunately, yes, some bloggers, it's surprising me that they say you say that government loses billions of grivs every year for this, but they're getting more money. Yep, but the excise is getting increased for 20% and the income for 5%. So doesn't it tell us something? Yes, unfortunately, sometimes such not perfectly organized and coordinated things, they bring us to some consequences. But listening to our first and second panel, the reason why the shadow grows, I think there are two sides of it. First is the pressure on legal and white business and business in general, which makes businesses just go out in the shadow, try to survive in this illegal way. And another one is not using and utilizing all the opportunities and all the reforms and all the options that are here today for businesses that were the ones to regulate all of the mentioned and to be able to fight this problem by their own. And finalizing with the European Business Association and our guests today, our speakers and the organizations mentioned, they keep the hard work in order to counter this issue. And you can see that all our powers are directed in order to stabilizing this white and bona fide businesses. We want to support all of this initiatives, and again, along with the ministry, as we mentioned, we're trying to work towards regulating e-commerce, creating portals, online portals, where you can track the registered businesses. Another draft bill that regulates the procedures for collective management, as we discussed today on electronics, and using this cash registers this is a must-have, because we're talking about laws that became enacted back in 2019. We're against the bills that try to postpone this mandatory cash registers using. And of course, this will only bring us to a bigger problem and the issues we're having with not giving out this fiscal receipts, and which brings us more problem with consumers' rights. And so all the different aspects, the criminalization of this smuggling products and the unregistered mobile phones and different products. So, and just to, okay, there's a question. Yes, thank you. If I may, I would like to suggest. So it would be very efficient, as for me, to use social advertisement that is going to be free for businesses, where you could cover the advantages of having the receipt, not only for cashback, but also for the taxes for roads, for hospitals, for lighting on the streets. So let's unite our efforts, and for the next year, we could suggest for our government to run this program. It's super cheap. Thank you. Okay, so again, circling back, then Dmytro Boyarchuk, Case Ukraine, has a small presentation and covering the white price. This is a social advertisement. Follow the white price. How do you think? What's similar in these products, and what's the difference? They look pretty the same. So let's talk about this. So these boots, they were produced in Italy, and they went through all the steps. And one day, they started a journey to Ukraine, but in different routes. For the first pair of boots, it went through the customs, where it paid all the taxes, and another one got to the stores in a different way. But both of them are standing there and waiting for their client. Of course, the ones that didn't pay the taxes, they have better prices. But don't rush to make this decision. When you're paying and you're purchasing white goods, you're making something very important. You're paying the salary to the teacher that is working for your child. You're paying for soldiers. They're protecting us, the doctors that are taking care of our health. So this is it. And that's how we form around 80%, up to 80% of governmental budget each year, which helps us to do all the mentioned things. But some businesses not necessarily do all the legal steps. And you as a client and as a consumer, you did all the steps on your side. But unfortunately, so you can see that white goods from different goods, you cannot really tell them one from each other. So that's why, right, starting from this moment, the white products will have a special sticker that this is a white product. So be sure to check that. Thank you. My name is Dmytro Boyarchuk, and I work in Analytics Center, and the head of the center, and we're the organization that created this awareness initiative, the price of the state. Maybe you heard about it. We're talking about taxes. So our polls that show that Ukrainians, they don't even realize they're paying taxes, or maybe they heard something about it when they're getting their salaries, that someone is paying some taxes to the pension fund, but it's a small amount of people that know and they're aware of the taxes that are being paid at the stores. So this indirect taxes, this is a small amount of people. Around 20% of the responders had some idea about it. So our initiative is more educative, and we try to bring this information to people for a lot of years. We try to reach out to businesses and using the capacities of businesses, run these campaigns. And and increase the awareness about taxes. Because when you share this with people, they can just repeat what you said, but they don't really understand. They don't have the feeling what it means. So our basic idea that we need to talk about taxes at the spots where people are paying for something, where they get their money out. So we had the idea of this initiative, White Price. This concept is to inform people about taxes, work on their economic awareness, but you cannot talk about taxes to someone who's not paying those or not paying them completely. So this initiative really needs to engage this white businesses for them to support this initiative. Thank you, Sergey. Awesome. So there is a video. Someone says it's a little rather big video, but this is a huge step that we seen even last year. So, dear colleagues, we shared this information. I hope that it will be useful for us in the future and everyone will hear us. And I'm thankful that you're paying for taxes and you are pushing this white rules of game. So thank you. Pay for your taxes and pay for white prices.